Thanks everyone for joining in. So I was just looking at this quote of Bruno's: to be rich in life means striving for God. Such an interesting quote, because we all have ideas about what it means to be rich, right? And, even us spiritual people, whatever that means, all of us want to be rich, I think. Maybe not all, but we, that metaphor, and Bruno sometimes uses that metaphor of money, it really, it kind of tugs at something in us. Well, yeah, I want rich, I want to be abundant, because there's this idea that money will solve all of our problems. And yet Bruno kind of turns that around and says being rich in life means striving for God, not just having, connection to the divine, but striving for that. So it just totally turns around the sort of the value system of modern society, or as Bruno calls it, culture, having culture being just that which has moved away from nature. So many people think that money will solve all their problems, and it's a primary drive for so many people today. And yet Bruno Groening says that to strive for God, that's what it means to be rich. How is that possible? How does that make any sense at all? Well, according to Bruno Groening, God has everything that we need. I'll read a quote. God possesses, this is a quote from Bruno, God possesses everything that human beings need. Human beings have forgotten that. So if we strive for that which has everything we need, that sounds like we're headed in the right direction. It's reminiscent of a parable that we talked about recently from the Bible, where Christ talked about the jewel of great price or unestimable worth that this merchant, paraphrasing here, found a precious, valuable jewel in this field. And he went and sold everything he had so that he could have that field and hence have the pearl. So over and over, Bruno said, in different ways, to be connected to God, that is everything. And so if we're seeking that, we're literally seeking everything. And in a sense, we've escaped from one of the primary forms of ignorance in the world, that people, places, and things are what it's all about. That money, people, places, and things, that's what life is about. Actually, according to Bruno Groening, life is about connection to God. And not just the feeling of connection to God, but having that feeling and then living it, living our beliefs, living our convictions. I sometimes describe it as an inspired life, being connected to God, being connected to spirit, and then living that. And I feel that's so important, because a lot of modern spirituality, and maybe this has been going on throughout history, I don't know, but there's a lot of modern spirituality that just is kind of like, and I know about it because I fell for it. It's kind of like about getting this spiritual high. Like, I'm just going to sit around and feel God and feel this bliss. and read these spiritual books and have these spiritual thoughts, but not really live, not really do anything. And that's not exactly what, well, according to Bruno Groening, he said, turn your beliefs into action. And he said, less words, more deeds. In the end, it comes down to living it. And in the end, he gives a very, very strong example of what enlightenment is and isn't. It's from Powers of the Spirit. I've read it many times. It's on page 251. I'll just summarize. He gives the example of a someone who has attained a high level of spiritual mastery, but lives in a monastery, lives in isolation, and that such a being would have to be reborn because it's about living spiritual truths. He specifically said living spiritual truths while being amidst flawed people, right? Because that's where the rubber hits the road. It's easy to feel connected to God, reading spiritual books by ourselves on our own, but to maintain that connection while being out and about, while being active, and while interacting with people who maybe don't have any interest in God, who in fact maybe have interest in the other, who are interested in harming people, in doing evil, and to stay connected to God and live these spiritual truths under those circumstances. Bruno says only then can one be fully redeemed. So the spiritual path is not always easy. It gets a lot easier when we really get humble and surrender. But even then, Bruno described it as a fight, and that evil will constantly try and pull us off of it. And to anyone who's on the path, it's almost like I want to say congratulations, and almost like Bruno Groening is saying congratulations. If you're striving, he didn't say if you're interested. Being rich means being interested in God. He didn't say that. He said striving. Anyone who's striving for God. It's like Bruno Groening is saying, you're rich. You may not know it. You may not feel it in every moment. But the logic of it is sound. If God is everything, infinite love, infinite goodness, abundance, and we're striving for that, then we're seeking the right thing. Thanks so much for listening. Hope this was helpful, and I wish you much, much striving for the divine, and hence much grace. As Benjamin Franklin said, I'm a firm believer in luck. And the harder I work, the more of it I seem to have. In a spiritual point of view, the word would be grace, or miracles, or magic, or flow, divine intercession. I'm a firm believer in grace, divine grace. And the harder I work, the more of it I seem to have. Very, very true. So I wish you good striving and a strong fight. Not in the human sense of the word, but a spiritual sense of the word. The fight against evil and the striving for good. And by fight, I believe what Bruno Groening means is vigorous effort. Vigorous effort. Not so much a combative battle with violence, but vigorous effort in seeking God, the good. Take care. Much love. Aloha.